Welcome back. Now, South Africa has now reached a milestone in the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic with a recovery rate of 84%. But the country doesn't seem to be clawing its way out of corruption, the other epidemic. Despite the health crisis, corrupt business people and some state officials continue to take advantage of the procurement system. Companies were awarded tenders worth millions of rand to supply protective equipment without following proper procedures. The tender scandal rages on. To discuss this, I'm joined now by a panel that includes Dr. Crispian Oliver, researcher Karam Singh, head of legal and investigation at Corruption Watch, as well as Themba Godi. And we are hoping to be joined by the former Auditor General, Shauket Fakie. So let's start the conversation then. Let me start with you, Mr. Godi. Having spent so much time in the belly of the beast there as chairperson of Scopa, the watchdog of public accounts and spending at all levels of government, are you surprised? Let me tell you, I wasn't surprised that there would be people who would be seeking to milk the system. From the moment it was announced that there would be emergency procurement that is allowed to deal with this disaster, let me tell you straight up, I sort of knew this was going to happen.
Well, thanks, Thulas. I think when you look at the report of the Auditor General, which was early this year, somewhere there, which indicated that there was an annual rise in the amounts of irregular expenditure. I told you that the machinery of corruption did not go away with Zuma as were made to, but that it is institutionalized. However, I think you would forgive South Africans to have, out of the nature of human beings, that facing a pandemic that has gripped the world, there will be some level of humanity, some level of shame in terms of what can and what cannot be done. That is why the shock to this looting was maybe far more outrageous than before, simply because people had an expectation that somehow people will appreciate that the whole country.
Too much belief in humanity, particularly given our experience. Karam, let me bring you in here. You consistently watch, as Corruption Watch, you consistently watch the trends in corruption. And according to your latest reports, procurement corruption ranks really highly in terms of the forms of corruption that we do see in the country. So given that, you sort of expected this, right? That there would be people seeking to make a quick buck from the response to the pandemic. All right, it seems we have a bit of an issue there with Karam Singh. Let me throw this to you, Dr. Crispian Oliver. You also... Oh, it seems there's a bit of a delay there. Go on, Karam. All right, we're going to have to return to Karam there. Let me come back to you, Dr. Crispian Oliver. You've been in the belly of the beast as well, in as far as, operating within the state and getting to understand some of what, your former comrades, I don't know if I should say your comrades or former comrades got up to. And basically it left you with a particular distinct sense of a morality that exists, particularly at local government. Given all of that, were you surprised that we've reached the heights that we have reached in terms of procurement corruption?
Look, the situation we're in has been a long time coming. I've been right, as you say, at the coalface in a city called Nelson Mandela Bay, where I watched firsthand the way that a very venal political leadership, the ANC was in charge at the time, had latched onto the municipality and were extracting rents through almost every area that they could. Infrastructure services, housing, IT contracts, corporate services, you name it. There was a system of rent extraction going on. And I'm afraid that that is not a unique situation. It's something that we find almost generically across the whole local government sector. And I have to say that it's not only confined to the ANC as a political party. I've watched Nelson Mandela Bay subsequently fall under a coalition government, and the UDM Mayor Mongameli Bobani get up to exactly the same tricks. You've seen in the latest Auditor General's report a shocking state of affairs. Once again, about a third of municipalities are utterly dysfunctional. They are facing financial collapse. They can't get their financial statements together. They can't account for the money that they've been given.
Yeah.
If you put COVID-19 funds into that system, you're guaranteed that there's going to be widespread corruption. And I take a bet now. We haven't heard even a quarter of the problems in local government.
Sure.
We're getting a whole lot of stories now about provincial health.
Yeah.
But it's the municipal side where there's going to be real problems.
But that system of rent seeking, which seems to be deeply entrenched now that Crispian Oliver speaks about, Mr. Godi, how is that possible? South Africans will be asking themselves, how is that possible when procurement, on paper at least, it's very regulated? You have your PFMA, Public Finance Management Act, you have the Municipal Finance Management Act, you have Treasury regulations. This is watched by the Auditor General, and Michael Marilia was referring to PRECA, the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act, yet still somehow ways are found. What are some of the key ways that people find to bypass the system? All right, there seems to be a bit of a challenge there with It seems to be a bit of a challenge there with Themba Godi. So let me throw this question to Karam Singh from Corruption Watch. He joins us now via the line. It seems there's a bit of a difficulty with his internet connectivity. Karam, let me throw this question to you and say, you watch trends in corruption, and your latest report identifies procurement as a particular area of concern. Talk to me firstly about that. What percentage of the corruption reports and tip-offs that you receive is accounted for by the way of procurement corruption?
Thanks, Thulasizwe. Yeah, if you look at the trend analysis of the reports that Corruption Watch receives, annually procurement-related allegations always ranks amongst the highest types of reports that we receive. This is across the public sector, as Chippy mentioned. This is allegations that are coming out of municipalities, it's coming out of provincial departments. We know the exposés which have come out about state-owned enterprises, and of course, the kind of large-scale procurement fraud that we've seen at national departments. So it's really across the board public sector, across the public sector's board, and we receive those allegations regularly.
All right, Dr. Oliver, let me bring you back into this conversation. In fact, I was asking about, we have a battery of legislation, and from a distance, it looks like the system is watched from all angles, pun unintended, in as far as the name of the show is concerned. But what is it that people are able to exploit directly? Are we, these people who are walking around showing off our fat wallet, just ready to be taken by these robbers, or have they become so sophisticated to the extent, for instance, of being able to bypass this whole issue around conflict of interest?
Yeah, Thulasizwe, if I was to try and put my finger on what the core of the problem is, I think we've got an overbearing political system where you've got political leadership directly involved in senior management appointments and administrative decision-making in municipalities. And that is complete executive overreach. The law is very clear. Politicians set policy, officials implement that policy. But we've given inadequate protection to our officials. So a municipal manager or a head of department who stands up against their mayor or their MMC and says, no, I'm not going to do that, they just get fired. And there are many pretexts that you can, find for firing someone or putting, some of these disciplinary cases drag on for 18 months, so the person is out of the way anyway.
Yeah, to just wear them down.
The politician can then just get their way.
Yeah, and basically hound them out of the position. Themba Godi, I know maybe one day you will write a book about some of the horror stories that you uncovered during your time in Scopa. But I mean, Section 38 of the PFMA talks about accounting officers needing to ensure a system of procurement that is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. How then, Themba Godi, do we end up with the situation like the one we have? Give us some examples. I'd like to hear some anecdotes of some of the creative ways through which we've been robbed.
Yeah, well, I think firstly, Thulas, rent-seeking is a political disease and not an administrative one. So whatever administrative measures are there, as long as the political setup and the political culture and orientation is wrong, then your administrative measures will get in the way. But what you have, it's you now have a lot of variations and expansions. That is, Thulas will get a contract that is worth 5 million, but then it gets extended until 100 million. The other very obvious situations where the bid adjudication committee would scores, but then the DG or the CFO will simply ignore whatever has been put there and award the tender to whoever they want. Or they will engage in what they will call emergency procurement. Even though we know that in emergency procurement, there are processes. Then they will follow no process and say it was an emergency. And when you look, you find that the major weakness is contract management, because you know this contract was going to expire after so many years. When that time comes, 6-8 months down the line, nothing has been done, and that contract has to continue. And when you check closely, you find that these are done to assist certain individuals or certain companies to benefit.
All right, let's pause it there for a moment. I want to take a quick break to allow me to introduce our other guests that will be taking part in this conversation that we've been having so far with Crispian Oliver and also researcher Karam Singh, who's joining us down the line, as well as Themba Godi. Stand by, more of this in just a moment.